You learned early how to disappear without leaving the room. You learned how to listen instead of speak, how to sense shifts in tone, how to stay still when emotions move too fast around you. Silence became your safest language. At some point, being quiet stopped being a choice, it became instinct. And here's the paradox that defines your life now. What once protected you is now slowly harming you. The quiet that kept you safe as a child now keeps you unseen as an adult. The emotional restraint that once prevented chaos now prevents intimacy. The vigilance that once helped you survive now never lets you rest. You do not talk much, not because you have nothing to say, but because somewhere inside you are still scanning for danger. You feel deeply, too deeply, yet you trained yourself to feel privately. So you sit with emotions instead of sharing them. You carry weight without letting anyone feel it. You tell yourself, you are fine, and almost believe it. Almost. This is not a story about introversion. It is a story about adaptation. And adaptation, when it goes on too long, becomes a prison. To understand this archetype, we need to name it clearly. This is the psychology of suppressed authenticity, shaped by emotional threat. Not overt abuse, not always trauma you can point to, but emotional neglect, the absence of a tuned response when you needed it most. Let us ground this in psychology. Your nervous system learned to stay alert always. You monitor faces, moods, silences. Your body stays slightly tense even during calm moments. This is not anxiety. It is conditioning. Your system learned that safety was unpredictable. At some point you became the stable one, the emotional container, the child who managed adults instead of being managed. You learned responsibility before regulation, maturity before innocence. You do not avoid closeness because you do not want it. You avoid it because closeness once came with cost. Needs led to disappointment. Dependence led to vulnerability. So your attachment system adapted. I will need less. I will feel quietly. I will stay contained. Neuroscience shows that when you are quiet and still, the mind turns inward for you. It does not rest, it ruminates. It replays, it analyzes, it prepares for threats that may never come. Slowly your identity forms around being low. Maintenance, emotionally strong, the one who does not need much. But that identity was built on absence, not choice. There is a grief no one sees. Not the grief of losing someone, but the grief of losing yourself in small, invisible ways. You traded authenticity for acceptance, expression for peace, spontaneity for control. And you did it intelligently. But the cost shows up everywhere. You fear judgment not because you are weak, but because judgment once meant losing connection. You fear abandonment not because you are needy, but because emotional absence shaped your nervous system. You fear rest because rest feels like letting your guard down. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents. You suffered more in imagination than in reality. Your suffering was not dramatic, it was chronic, a quiet erosion. Invisible grief is the hardest to mourn, because no one told you that you were allowed to grieve. This does not stay in childhood. It grows up with you. You might notice that in relationships you give more than you ask. You stay quiet when something hurts you, hope people will notice, and then feel disappointed when they do not. This is not manipulation, it is conditioning. In your career you work hard but remain unseen. You hesitate to self-advocate. You feel safest being competent, not visible. In self-worth you measure value by usefulness. Rest feels undeserved, receiving feels uncomfortable. In boundaries you sense when something is wrong, but explaining it feels exhausting, so you tolerate more than you should. In emotional regulation you appear calm, but release comes in waves, sudden exhaustion, unexpected numbness, delayed overwhelm. In identity you ask yourself, who would I be if I did not have to be careful? Every one of these behaviors began as protection. They were not flaws, they were solutions. But solutions carried too long become limitations. Awareness is not blame. Awareness is permission to unlearn. Healing does not mean becoming louder. It means becoming truer. It begins with gentleness, not force. Inner child work is not reliving the past. It is offering the safety that was missing. Shadow work is meeting the parts of you that learned silence, not to erase them, but to thank them and release their role. Nervous system regulation means slow breath, grounded presence, teaching your body that safety can exist now. And most importantly, choosing softness over survival. You do not need to prove resilience anymore, you already did. You are allowed to take up emotional space. You are allowed to be felt. You are allowed to rest without justification. What healed me was not becoming stronger. It was becoming safer inside myself. If this resonated, let it land. If it named something you felt but never said, you are not alone. Like, share, subscribe, not for the algorithm, but because someone else might finally feel seen. The goal is not to be fixed, but to become whole.